be. I hid an Apache mother and her son. Now she wants me to be the father and give her another child. It was a quiet evening when he first saw them. The sun had almost disappeared behind the hills, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. The small town where he lived had a calm feeling at this hour, the kind that made people pause and take a deep breath. But that evening the calm would be broken in a way he could never have imagined. He was walking along the edge of the woods that bordered the town, thinking about his day. Best. Life had been ordinary, predictable, and safe. He liked it that way. He liked routine. But as he walked, he noticed movement in the shadows near the trees. At first, he thought it was just an animal, perhaps a deer moving quietly. But then he saw a woman, holding the hand of a small boy. Their clothes were dusty and torn in places, and there was a look of fear in their eyes that made his heart tighten instantly. The woman stopped a few steps away, and he could see her face clearly now. Her eyes were wide, scanning the woods as if she expected someone to be chasing her. The boy clung to her side, looking exhausted but alert. She was of Apache descent, and her face told a story of strength mixed with hardship. There was something in the way she carried herself, despite the fear, that made him pause and not turn away like he might have done with strangers before. He called out softly, trying to make himself appear calm. "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" The woman froze, her eyes darting toward him. She didn't speak at first. The boy tugged at her sleeve, whispering something that he couldn't hear. He noticed the way the boy's small hands trembled as he held on to his mother. There was something desperate about them, something that told him this was not a simple situation. "Boss." Finally, the woman spoke, her voice quiet but firm. We need a place to stay. Just for a little while." He hesitated. Helping strangers, especially in situations that could be dangerous, was not something he usually did. But he looked into her eyes and saw a mixture of trust and fear. She wasn't asking for much. Just safety. Just shelter. He knew what it was like to feel unsafe, to be alone in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving. Something inside him told him he couldn't just walk away. "Okay," he said, keeping his voice calm. "Follow me. But you have to trust me. I don't know exactly what's going on, but I can't have anyone coming after you here." Desk. The woman nodded, relief washing over her face, but it was quickly replaced by caution. She looked around the woods nervously before stepping forward. The boy stayed close to her, his small hand in hers. He noticed the boy's eyes, dark and wary, as if he had seen things no child should have seen. They followed him back to a small house at the edge of town. It wasn't much, just a modest home with a garden and a few trees. But it was safe and private. As he led them inside, he noticed how quiet the boy was, how carefully he moved as if he didn't want to draw attention. The woman kept glancing over her shoulder, almost expecting someone to appear from the shadows at any moment. Once inside, he offered them food and water. The woman hesitated at first, but then accepted, giving her son some as well. They sat at his kitchen table, and he noticed the careful way she served the boy, making sure he had enough while taking less herself. There was love in that simple gesture, a protective instinct that didn't need words to be understood. He tried to start a conversation, but it was difficult. The woman didn't say much about why they were running, only that they needed to stay hidden for a while, knowing that trust couldn't be forced. Instead, he focused on small talk, asking about the boys' favorite foods, the places they had come from, and the small things that could make life feel normal. Over the next few hours, he watched them carefully, noticing the little things that told him about their lives. Boy had a habit of fidgeting with his hands, twisting a small piece of cloth he carried. The woman would glance at him often, a mix of worry and affection in her eyes. He realized that they had been through something difficult, and that their trust in him was a big step. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. That night, he offered them a place to sleep. He gave the boy a small bed in one of the guest rooms and set up a mat for the woman nearby. She looked at him, hesitant, and then nodded quietly. "Thank you," she said softly. It wasn't just politeness. It was a deep, heartfelt gratitude that made him feel the significance of what he was doing. He stayed awake for a while after they had fallen asleep, thinking about what he had gotten himself into. Helping them was the right thing to do, but it was complicated. There were questions in his mind.
How long could he keep them hidden?
What if someone came looking for them? How would this change his life? But as he watched them, he felt something else too, a sense of purpose. For the first time in a long while, he felt needed in a way that wasn't about work or routine, but about human connection. He realized that in that quiet moment, he had made a choice that could change all their lives, including his own. The next morning, he woke to find the woman already awake, sitting quietly by the window with her son asleep beside her. But there was a calmness in her eyes now, a sign that perhaps, for the first time in a long time, she felt a little safe. He made breakfast for all of them, and they ate together in silence, the quiet filled with unspoken understanding. Over the next few days, he learned more about them, little by little. The woman spoke sparingly, sharing small stories about her life, her culture, and the traditions she valued. The boy opened up slowly, showing him drawings he had made, asking questions about the world outside their hiding place. Each day, their presence became a part of his routine, and he began to see them not just as strangers, but as a small family forming under extraordinary circumstances. He also noticed the challenges. The woman was protective, sometimes to the point of tension. She didn't trust easily, and he couldn't blame her. He had seen that fear in her eyes from the beginning, and it was clear that it came from experiences he could barely imagine. But she was also resilient, resourceful, and clever. Breaths. She knew how to survive in difficult situations, and he found himself admiring her strength, even as he worried about the risks. Every evening they would sit together in the living room, the boy playing quietly while they talked softly. The woman asked about his life, his experiences, and he shared cautiously, building a bridge of trust between them. The bond grew slowly, but surely, a fragile yet meaningful connection forming in the safety of his home. Despot. He began to realize that hiding them was not just about protecting them from danger. It was also about understanding, compassion, and human connection. Each small act of kindness, each shared meal, each moment of patience built a foundation for something deeper than he had ever expected. Days turned into weeks, and the initial tension began to ease. The woman and her son started to relax a little more, smiling more often, laughing quietly at small jokes. He noticed how the boy's eyes would light up when he showed him something new or shared a story. The woman would watch him closely, a mixture of gratitude and caution in her gaze. It was clear that they were beginning to trust him, and with that trust came both hope and responsibility. And so, life, in that small house, settled into a strange but meaningful rhythm. He provided shelter, food, and protection, and in return they offered trust, companionship, and glimpses into their lives that he could never have imagined. He knew that challenges were ahead, that hiding them would not be easy, and that decisions he hadn't yet faced would soon come. But for now, in those quiet days filled with cautious smiles, whispered conversations, and shared meals, they were safe. And in that safety a bond was forming, one that would change all their lives in ways none of them could yet understand. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet house at the edge of town slowly transformed from a temporary hiding place into a small home filled with cautious routines. The boy began to adjust to the rhythm of safety, though his eyes still carried the shadows of fear. The woman, ever vigilant, maintained a careful balance between trust and caution. For the protagonist, life had changed completely, though he tried to keep some sense of normalcy in his own way. He noticed small things that revealed the boy's personality. The child loved to draw, often sketching animals, trees, and the occasional small house. He was curious, asking questions about everything he saw. Birds outside the window, the way the sunlight hit the floor in the morning, or why certain foods were cooked in particular ways. His curiosity reminded the protagonist of a simpler, freer time, and it often made him smile despite the tension that lingered in the air. The mother watched her son closely, guiding him without being overbearing. She explained the importance of staying quiet, of watching for strangers, and of being careful in a world that could be cruel. Yet, she also encouraged his imagination, letting him create stories and drawings that allowed him to escape the fear that sometimes haunted him. The balance was delicate, but the protagonist admired how she managed it. She was strict when she needed to be, gentle when the situation allowed, and always deeply caring. Over time, small conversations began to form between the protagonist and the mother. Bears, she remained guarded, speaking cautiously about her past. But bits and pieces emerged. She had faced hardships he could only imagine, loss, displacement, and struggles tied to her culture and community. She spoke of her son with pride and love, describing the little moments that made him unique. Though she did not ask for much, her trust in him grew slowly, and he felt the weight of that trust like a responsibility he could not ignore. Evenings became the most meaningful time of day. The three of them would gather around the small kitchen table after dinner, sometimes talking, sometimes sitting in comfortable silence. The boy would show the protagonist his drawings, explaining his stories with innocent excitement. The mother would listen, smiling softly at her son's imagination, occasionally adding details or correcting small facts. These moments were precious, a fragile piece that seemed almost impossible given their circumstances. The protagonist also learned about her traditions and cultural values. She spoke of the Apache way of life, sharing small rituals, stories, and lessons passed down from her family. At first, he listened quietly, unsure how much to say or ask. But over time, he began to understand the depth of her pride, the resilience of her people, and the love she carried for her son. He realized that helping them was not just about shelter and safety. It was about respecting their identity and culture, and allowing them to maintain a sense of dignity despite their situation. The bond between the three of them grew slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. The boy began to seek out the protagonist's company, asking him to read stories or help with drawings. He would sometimes lean against his shoulder while watching the world outside, his small trust a silent but powerful acknowledgement of the safety the protagonist provided. The mother, too, showed signs of reliance, often seeking advice about small matters or simply sharing her thoughts about the day. The house, once quiet and tense, began to feel alive with the rhythms of their shared lives. Yet the situation was never free of tension. The mother remained cautious, always scanning for potential threats. There were nights when the boy would wake up crying from nightmares, and she would comfort him while he watched from his own room, unsure how to help without breaking his cover. The protagonist often found himself walking the line between providing comfort and maintaining safety, wondering if they could continue like this indefinitely. One afternoon, the protagonist found himself sitting with the mother outside on the small porch. The boy was playing quietly nearby, drawing in the dirt with a stick. She spoke softly about her hopes for the future, about wanting her son to grow up safe, educated, and free from the fear that had shaped her own life. Her words were filled with a quiet determination, a deep hope that seemed almost impossible in their current circumstances.
"You've given us more than I can explain," she said.
"I don't know how to thank you." Her eyes met his, and he saw gratitude, relief, and something else, an unspoken bond that had formed over weeks of shared struggle. He nodded, unsure how to respond. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "I'm just helping. That's all. But even as he spoke, he knew it was more than that. Their presence had changed his life as much as he had changed theirs. He felt a sense of purpose, of responsibility, and of connection that he hadn't felt in years. The boy, curious as always, interrupted their conversation with a question about the trees around the house. Brett. They laughed together as he explained what each tree meant to him, and for a brief moment, the shadows of fear seemed to lift. The protagonist realized that these moments, small, quiet, and ordinary, were the most extraordinary of all. They were building a life together, one cautious step at a time, and in that process they were teaching each other about trust, resilience, and love. As the days passed, he began to notice subtle changes in the mother, but she became more open, sharing small details about her past, her family, and the challenges she had faced. Her stories were filled with pain, but also with strength and hope. She spoke of the importance of community, of traditions that had sustained her people through hardship. Through these conversations, he began to understand her not just as someone he was helping, but as a person with depth, history, and dreams. The boy, too, grew more confident. He would sometimes run to him with drawings or questions, seeking his opinion or simply wanting to share a moment. He noticed how the boy's laughter began to fill the house, how the fear that had once dominated his expression was slowly replaced by curiosity and joy. These small victories felt monumental, and the protagonist felt proud, not of himself but of the trust and courage the child had shown. Life in the house remained quiet, but it was filled with meaning. She. Each meal shared, each story told, each drawing admired, became a thread weaving them together into a fragile but real family. The protagonist understood that their time together was temporary in some ways. They could not stay hidden forever, but in the present, they had something valuable. They had trust, they had safety, and they had each other. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with shades of gold and pink, the mother asked him a question he hadn't expected. She spoke softly, almost hesitantly, about what it meant to have someone truly care for you. Breath. She spoke about family, not just the one you are born into, but the one you create through trust, respect, and love.
Her words were thoughtful, careful, and filled with emotion.
He listened, realizing that what she was saying went deeper than anything he had considered before. Helping them had started as an act of compassion, but it had grown into something more profound. It was about connection, about understanding another person's pain and hope, about building trust in the face of fear. And he knew, deep down, that their lives were now intertwined in ways that could not be undone. The boy, sensing the seriousness of the conversation, stayed quietly nearby. He was drawing again, but this time, his small hands worked with a focus that seemed almost purposeful. As if he understood the weight of the moment, the protagonist watched them both, feeling a mixture of pride, responsibility, and an unspoken bond that tied them together.
Over the next few weeks, the routine solidified even further.
The mother and son adjusted to the small rhythms of life and hiding, and the protagonist continued to provide safety, guidance, and support. They learned from each other, grew with each other, and found small joys in the quiet moments. The house became a sanctuary, not just physically, but emotionally, a place where fear could be set aside, even if only for a little while.
He often reflected on how strange and unexpected this all was.
Just weeks ago, he had been living a predictable life, unaware that it would change so completely. Now his days were filled with small acts of care, laughter, conversation, and reflection. He realized that helping them had become not just an obligation, but a privilege. He was witnessing resilience, love, and trust in its rawest, most human form. And yet, beneath all the moments of calm, he knew that challenges were still ahead. They could not remain hidden forever. The world outside was unpredictable, and often harsh. But for now, in the quiet evenings and shared mornings, they had built something meaningful together, something that could withstand fear, uncertainty, and the unknown. In that small house at the edge of town, 3 lives were slowly merging into one fragile, beautiful bond. They were no longer just a stranger, a mother and her son. They were a family in the making, held together by trust, respect, and shared experience. And though the future remained uncertain, they had found something rare, a place where they could feel safe, understood, and, for the first time in a long while, truly alive. As the weeks passed, the small house at the edge of town began to feel like a real home. The boy laughed more often, drawing with brighter colors and asking endless questions about the world outside. The mother's cautious demeanor softened at times, though she remained watchful, always aware that danger could appear at any moment. The protagonist, who had once thought his life would remain quiet and simple, now found himself deeply connected to both of them. He felt responsible not just for their safety, but for their happiness and well-being. One evening, after a long day of small chores and quiet play, the 3 of them sat in the living room. The boy was coloring pictures of the nearby woods, humming softly to himself. The mother sat close by, watching him with a faint smile that carried both pride and fatigue. The protagonist leaned against the wall, trying to catch his breath after lifting some boxes in the kitchen. There was a calmness in the room, a sense of ordinary life that had grown extraordinary simply because of the bond they shared. Then, suddenly, the mother's eyes met his. There was a seriousness in her expression he had not seen before. The quiet hum of the boy faded into silence as she spoke. "I want to ask you something." "Something important," she said softly, almost as if she feared the words themselves. He tilted his head, curious, but cautious. Breath. "What is it?" he asked, trying to keep his tone gentle, not wanting to frighten her or make her feel judged. She took a deep breath, her hands twisting slightly in her lap. I want you to be a part of our family in a way that goes beyond what you already are," she said slowly, choosing her words carefully.
I want you to be the father of another child."
Her words hung in the air, heavier than he had expected. He had been prepared for danger, for fear, for challenges of all kinds, but nothing had prepared him for this. His mind raced, trying to understand the weight of her request. He glanced at the boy, who looked up at him with innocent curiosity, unaware of the seriousness of the moment. Breaths rasp. The mother's gaze softened, pleading silently for understanding.
"I know it's a lot," she continued.
"I know it might sound strange, but I trust you, and I feel safe with you, and I want my son to have a family, a father, someone to protect him and love him. And I want to give him a sibling, someone who can grow up alongside him." He sat in silence, processing her words. His life had changed dramatically already, and now she was asking him to make a commitment unlike any he had imagined. He felt a mixture of emotions: surprise, fear, confusion, and a strange pull toward the idea of building a family with them. He realized that the bond they shared had grown deeper than he had allowed himself to notice. They were no longer strangers, no longer just a mother and her child seeking refuge. They had become a family. Fragile, but real. The mother saw his hesitation and reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "I am not asking for an answer right now," she said softly. "I just needed to tell you how I feel, what I hope for. I wanted you to understand. You don't have to decide today. I just wanted you to know." He nodded slowly, grateful for her patience.
He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, and he knew that whatever decision he made, it would affect all 3 of their lives.
He thought of the boy, of the small moments of laughter, curiosity, and trust that had grown between them. He thought of the mother, her strength, her kindness, and the way she had opened her heart to him. And he realized that saying yes or no was not just about him. It was about the life they could build together, or the pain that might come if he refused. Over the next few days, he struggled with his thoughts. He found himself watching them closely, noticing the little ways they had become part of his life. The boy would run to him with questions, seeking his opinion, or simply wanting to share a small discovery. The mother would speak to him softly, asking advice or confiding in him about her worries. Every interaction reminded him of the depth of the bond they shared and of the responsibility he had already assumed without realizing it. He began to think about what it would mean to say yes. It was not a simple matter of agreement. It was a lifelong commitment. It meant love, protection, and dedication. It meant raising a child together, nurturing a new life in a world that could be uncertain and unforgiving. And yet, he felt a strange sense of possibility, a sense that perhaps this was what he had been searching for all along. A connection deeper than routine, deeper than comfort. A bond that could shape his life and theirs in ways he had never imagined. The mother noticed his contemplation and did not pressure him. She understood that this was a decision that could not be rushed. Instead, she focused on the small things, keeping the household calm and nurturing, allowing him the space to think and reflect. She continued to share her traditions and stories, teaching the boy about the importance of family, culture, and resilience. The protagonist observed and learned, gaining a deeper appreciation for the strength and wisdom she carried, and for the bond that had quietly formed between them.
One evening, the boy asked a question that struck him deeply.
"Will we always be together?" he asked, looking up at him with wide, trusting eyes. There was no judgment in the question, no demand, just curiosity and hope. The protagonist felt a lump in his throat, realizing how much the boy had already come to rely on him. He swallowed hard and nodded slowly. "As long as we can," he said, choosing his words carefully. The mother smiled, placing her hand over the boy's. She did not speak, but her eyes conveyed gratitude, relief, and a quiet hope. He realized that her request for a child was not just about herself. It was about building a stable, loving environment for the boy, about giving him a future where he would feel secure and loved. And he understood, with a clarity he could not ignore, that whatever he decided, it would be an extension of the trust and connection they had built. He spent the nights thinking, unable to sleep. He considered the challenges, raising a child, navigating the dangers that might still exist, balancing responsibilities he had never imagined. But he also thought of the joys, the laughter of the boy, the quiet moments with the mother, the possibility of creating a family that was bound not just by circumstance, but by choice and love. Finally, he realized that the decision was not simply about agreement or refusal. It was about commitment, about trust, and about understanding what it meant to be part of their lives in a profound way. He knew that whatever path he chose, it would require courage, patience, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. One afternoon, as the sun filtered through the trees outside, he spoke to the mother. "I need time," he said, his voice steady. "I need to think about what you asked. It's not simple, and I don't want to make a decision without understanding everything it means. For you, for your son, and for me." She nodded, a small smile on her face. "I understand," she said softly. "I didn't expect an answer right away. I just needed you to know how I feel." The boy, sensing the seriousness of the conversation, continued to play quietly, drawing in the dirt with sticks and stones. The protagonist watched him, feeling a mixture of love, responsibility, and hope. He knew that whatever decision he made, it would not only shape their future, but also define the kind of person he wanted to be. As days turned into weeks, the tension between possibility and responsibility continued to grow. He found himself reflecting on the moments of connection, the laughter, the shared stories, the quiet understanding that had developed between them. He realized that the bond they shared was not just circumstantial, it was real, meaningful, and transformative. And then, one evening, something shifted. The mother approached him, her eyes calm but determined. I don't want to pressure you, she said, but I need you to know that whatever you decide, we will respect your choice. And whatever happens, I hope we can continue to be a family in some way, protecting each other, caring for each other, and sharing our lives, even if it's not the way I imagined. Her words reminded him that family was not always defined by traditional rules or expectations. It was defined by trust, care, and commitment, the very things they had built together over weeks of quiet connection. At night, as he watched the boy sleeping peacefully in his small bed, and the mother sitting quietly by the window, he realized that life had changed in ways he could never have predicted. He was no longer living for himself alone. He was part of something larger, something fragile but powerful. And he knew that the choice he would make would not just define their lives. It would define who he was, and who they could become together. He did not have the answer yet, but he understood one thing clearly. The bond they shared was unbreakable, and it would guide him toward the decision he would need to make. Whatever came next, he would face it with courage, empathy, and love, the very qualities that had brought them together in the first place. The days that followed were quiet, but the air in the small house at the edge of town felt heavier. The protagonist carried the weight of a decision he had been avoiding, one that now seemed unavoidable. He could feel the unspoken question lingering in every glance from the mother and every curious look from the boy. Life had grown complex in ways he had never imagined, and he knew he could not continue without facing the truth of what they all needed. Each morning he woke with a sense of responsibility pressing on him. The boy would come running with his sketches or questions, full of energy and trust. The mother would quietly prepare meals, her eyes soft with affection but always aware of the dangers around them. Their bond had grown into something strong and real, yet delicate. A family forged in unusual circumstances. He realized that whatever he decided, it would not erase the past, nor would it remove the hardships they had faced. But it could shape the future in a way that gave them hope. He spent time observing them closely, trying to understand what they truly needed. The boy thrived in this small, safe space. He laughed more freely than he had before, his imagination blossoming in the quiet moments of the day. The mother, too, seemed lighter, more at peace, though still cautious. He realized that both of them had begun to rely on him, not just for safety, but for companionship, guidance, and trust. And, in turn, he felt a connection he had never expected, one that went beyond duty or compassion. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the trees and painted the floor with soft patterns, he decided to speak with the mother. He wanted to understand her perspective fully and to give her the chance to express her feelings once more. They sat on the porch, the boy playing nearby, his laughter drifting in the warm breeze. "I've been thinking about what you asked," he began, carefully. "I know, it's not a simple decision. It's not something I can just agree to lightly." He paused, searching for the right words. "But I also understand why you asked. I see how much love you have for your son, and how much you want him to have a family, a sense of safety, and someone who cares for him in every way. And I see how much you care for him and for me as well." The mother listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes were steady, and though she remained cautious, there was a glimmer of hope in them. "I didn't want to pressure you," she said softly. "I just wanted you to know what I feel and what we need. I understand that this is a lot to ask. I wanted you to consider it carefully because I trust you." He nodded. "I have considered it, and I've realized something important. This isn't just about having another child. It's about the family we've already begun to form. It's about the bond we share, the trust we've built, and the lives we care about. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. I can't promise I have all the answers, and I can't promise it will be easy, but I can promise this. I will do everything I can to protect you both, to care for you, and to be there for you in every way I can. If we decide to take this step, it will be together, with honesty and respect. The mother's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of relief and gratitude. She reached out and gently touched his hand. "That's all I could hope for," she said. "Thank you for listening, for understanding, for being here. That's more than I ever expected." The boy, sensing the calm but serious tone of the conversation, paused in his play. He looked up at them both, curious and trusting. A protagonist smiled gently at him.
"You don't need to worry," he said, softly.
"Whatever happens, we'll face it together. We're a family now, and families stick together." The boy's face lit up with a small, shy smile, and he ran back to his drawings, feeling safe in the knowledge that they would face life together. Over the next few weeks, life in the house took on a new rhythm. The protagonist and the mother worked closely together, preparing meals, sharing household duties, and planning for the future. The boy thrived under their care, his laughter and curiosity filling the home with warmth. They began to speak openly about hopes, dreams, and fears, creating an environment of trust and love that neither had thought possible just weeks earlier.
The protagonist began to realize the depth of responsibility he had assumed.
It was not just about caring for two people. It was about nurturing a family, guiding a child, supporting a mother, and making choices that would affect all of their lives forever. Yet, he also felt a sense of purpose he had never experienced before. He was not just a protector, he was a participant in a family's story, helping to shape a life filled with love, respect, and connection. The mother, too, showed a new sense of peace. She spoke often of her hopes for the boy, of the traditions she wanted to pass on, and of the life she dreamed of creating with the help of someone she trusted. Her bond with the protagonist grew stronger, built not on obligation, but on mutual respect, understanding, and shared care. They began to plan small steps for the future, thinking about how they could support each other, raise a child together, and continue to provide safety and love for the boy. One evening, as the sky turned golden and the shadows lengthened, the mother spoke quietly to the protagonist.
"I know this won't be easy," she said.
"There will be challenges, and there will be fears, but I also know that with you here, we can face them." We've already built something beautiful, even in difficult circumstances. I believe we can continue to grow together as a family. He nodded, feeling the weight and truth of her words. "I believe that, too," he said. "We'll face everything together. Nothing will be perfect. And there will be hard days, but we'll be honest, patient, and caring with each other. That's how we'll make it work." The boy, overhearing parts of their conversation, looked up with wide eyes.
"Will we be a real family?" he asked, his voice small but filled with hope. The protagonist smiled, kneeling to meet him at eye level.
"Yes," he said softly. "We are a family. And families stick together no matter what." The boy's face brightened and he ran to hug both of them, feeling a sense of belonging he had not felt in a long time. As days turned into months, their lives continued in a rhythm of shared care, trust, and growing love. The protagonist began to see himself not just as a temporary protector, but as a true part of their lives. He helped the boy with his studies, shared stories of the outside world, and created a home filled with safety,
warmth, and understanding. The mother supported him in return, sharing her wisdom, guiding the boy, and offering her trust and affection. Together, they built a life that, while unconventional, was real, strong, and deeply meaningful. They faced challenges, of course. There were times when fear crept back, when the past seemed to shadow their days. But they faced these moments together, relying on trust, communication, and their growing bond. Each challenge strengthened their connection, teaching them resilience, patience, and the importance of family in every sense of the word. One afternoon, the mother spoke of her hopes for the future. "I want us to continue building this family," she said. "Breaths. Not just for now, but for the years ahead. I want my son to grow up feeling safe, loved, and supported."
And I want us to face life together, whatever comes our way. The protagonist nodded, understanding fully.
"We will," he said. "We'll take each day as it comes, supporting each other, caring for each other, and building the life we want together. It won't be perfect, but it will be ours." The boy, listening nearby, smiled brightly. He had never felt this level of security and love before, and it showed in his laughter, his curiosity, and the way he now approached each day with confidence. The house, once quiet and tense, was now filled with warmth, life, and the rhythms of a growing family. As they sat together that evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the protagonist felt a sense of peace he had never known. Life had changed dramatically in ways he could never have predicted, yet it had led him to something profoundly meaningful. He realized that family was not just about blood, it was about trust, care, and commitment.
And in that moment, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as a family.
The mother rested her head on his shoulder, and the boy nestled between them. In that quiet moment, the house was not just a place of safety. It was a home, filled with love, trust, and the promise of a shared future. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and difficult choices, but they had emerged stronger, connected, and ready to embrace life together. And so, their lives continued, not perfect, but real, meaningful, and full of hope. The bond they had formed would guide them through every challenge, every joy, and every uncertainty, shaping a family built not just on circumstance, but on love, trust, and the courage to care for one another. In each other they had found safety, understanding, and belonging, and that, in the end, was the greatest gift of all.